What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast live. Well, not actually live. I'm live as I'm talking, but just watch the Thursday night football game. The 49ers get a must-needed win, 36-24, dominate Seattle. But there were some shades. People were starting to go, is this happening over again? And it didn't. The 49ers didn't escape, but it was getting weird there for a minute, exactly like Arizona, exactly like the LA Rams game where they blew some divisional games that probably going to come back to bite them, especially when you're talking the number 1 overall seed, which is something they aspire to do. But we'll dive into the game. Seattle, kind of the same song and dance when they play the Niners and Geno Smith's their quarterback. Other than that, it's hard not to like their coach. It's hard not to like their coaching staff. They obviously have a lot of good players. They're pretty banged up right now. But for a team that dominated the 49ers for close to a decade with Russell Wilson, that has completely flipped now that they have transitioned to Geno Smith, which definitely saved their franchise. We'll dive into it. And obviously it's Fugazi Friday, and there was one of the biggest Fugazis of all time in the history of the NFL that happened on Monday night, and then his comments on Tuesday, and just with the Robert Saleh situation. So we'll dive into some of that. But yeah, man, it's a big weekend, fun weekend, but let's dive into the 49er game. But obviously, before we do that, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. Here's the thing with Game Time. This weekend, I don't get to go to many games anymore because I just have to be home on Sunday, so it's really hard to get out. And you miss so much if you go to an NFL game. But this weekend on Saturday, I'm going to the Red River Rivalry, which I'm really, really fired up to do. And I'm doing it because of Game Time. They made it really easy. You can search by price point. You can search where you want to sit. You can search by venue. You can search by team. It really is the easiest ticketing app I've ever used, and I just highly recommend it. So here's the thing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices. Guaranteed! The 49ers. Let's just start with the rivalry because it had become a really, really good game and considered a rivalry. And it started with Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll, and then it carried into Kyle Shanahan and Pete Carroll. And now I think it has a chance to continue with Mike McDonald and Kyle Shanahan. But it's always been one-sided. Russell Wilson was 17-4 against the 49ers. He completely owned them. Like, he dominated the rivalry. Some of his most magical moments of his career felt like they came against the 49ers. I mean, he destroyed them. And I'll give Seattle a ton of credit. When they pivoted off of him, which I was guilty, like a lot of people, I probably talked a lot of shit. I thought it was, not that it was a bad move in the sense of moving on from him, but they're like, we're going to go with Geno Smith and Drew Lock. I'm like, that ain't going to work. That would be a disaster and their team would fall apart. Turns out they were geniuses. They got rid of Russell Wilson, which was incredible for 49er people, whether you're on the team, whether you're a fan, whether you're a coach. It's like, get that guy out of the division. And if you're a Seattle fan, it's like your franchise has been very respectable. Won 9 games the last couple of years, went to the playoffs 2 years ago, looks kind of similar right now. Probably end up 9-ish wins with Geno Smith. But it's flipped this to Seattle owns the Niners to now the Niners own Seattle. They're 6-0 against Geno Smith. And the Geno Smith, who, listen, I have a lot of respect for resurrecting your career, but when he plays against the 49ers, he looks like the guy who was available for nothing a couple years ago, who any team could have had as a backup. He just doesn't play well against them. And this was the guy a couple weeks ago against Detroit on that Monday night game. It's like I get Brian Branch is out, but holy shit. I mean, he was slicing. He looked fantastic in that game. He never plays like that against the 49ers. And obviously, part of that is the 49ers pass rush. Bosa, I don't know what his final line was, but he was in Geno's just grill all night long, moving from the left side to the right side, spin moves, counter moves, power moves. So I don't know if he gets rattled off that and just Fred flying around the Niners DBs. Obviously, he threw 2 picks today. One pick was his first one was pretty atrocious. The second one, Herb Street kind of mentioned Renardo Green, the rookie from Florida State, undercuts it. DK probably ran a bad route. But just to the theme of this game and this new kind of addition of the rivalry with ran by Geno and now with Mike McDonald is completely one-sided. I mean, the 49ers fucking owned these guys now that Russell's gone, which is good for them. They need it. Obviously, they needed this game, but this used to be a place that was intimidating for them to play. It is a hard place to play. It gets really loud. You could tell it was getting loud in the second half, and the 49ers are pretty unfazed. And I think one thing that's crazy about the 49ers, 3 divisional games, and it felt like for a moment, like if Seattle scores here and the Niners lose, does Jed York let Kyle Shanahan fly in the plane right home? I mean, it would have been a carbon copy for 3 straight divisional games. The same thing, dominating the game. I look back, they outgained the Rams. They, by a lot, I think by like 140 yards. They outgained Arizona last week, not by as much, but they outgained them. So you like yardage and moving the ball has not been a problem, but they have been horrendous in the red zone. I think last week they were 1-6. And I know I saw a clip where Colin said on the TV show that Purdy has come back to the mean. And I would have to disagree with that. I actually think Purdy's been pretty good this season. I actually think Kyle has had an off season, has been terrible in the red zone. There were a couple drives today early in the red zone. You're like, Kyle, none of these plays are even remotely close. And then there was a drive where I think, it was the end of the first half for Seattle, where Ryan Grubb is clearly a pretty good OC. Now, they didn't end up scoring, but like all 3 plays, the guy was open, the DBs made a couple good plays, and one play DK stepped out of bounds. But it was like, Kyle, whatever you're doing right now in the red zone ain't working. And listen, obviously you're a good offensive coach. You are gaining yards and having success on these drives against every team you play. But then they get close to the goal line and they can't score. And then tonight it flipped. And Purdy, I think, got a lot of momentum when he hit Kittle on the touchdown on like the out route and the front of the goalpost. Hit him on another one in the middle of the field. Obviously, the late one to use check. But if the Niners are going to score touchdowns, like their defense is not as dominant as it's been. But like moving the ball and calling plays the 20 to the 20 has not been a problem for them at all. I mean, Mason, who hurt his shoulder tonight, I was texting someone, honestly, and I'm not comparing, like saying that's what he's going to be, but his running style is a lot like Marshawn Lynch. He has these heavy strides. His cuts are really like bounces, and on contact, he can just run through. Like you're watching him tonight, it looked like, is this guy about to go for like 180 yards? I think he had 9 carries for like 70. Then he hurts his shoulder, and maybe Kyle didn't want to risk it, whatever. But like that's a really, really good player, which is ironic because everyone is like, the reason they can't score in the red zone is because Christian McCaffrey is injured. And it's like, I got to push back on that. Clearly, you would rather have Christian McCaffrey than not have Christian McCaffrey. Like, no one's debating that. But let's look at the guys they do have out on the field. George Kittle should be a good red zone target. Like, you should be able to design plays for him. Obviously, they did tonight, and it worked. Juwan Jennings is like 6'3", 6'4". I have to say he's a pretty good red zone target. Deebo Samuel is like one of the best gadget players ever. I mean, you should be able to figure out a way to run a play or two for him to give him a shot. And then Brandon Ayuk, while not tall, is an elite route runner. So you should be able to scheme up plays with him in one-on-one situations where he can break off and create some space. So to me, it's on, and I think the quarterback's been playing pretty well. He does one thing that's driving me a little nuts, and it clearly is driving Kyle nuts. Because tonight, Herb Street said, and the way he phrased it was classic like announcer. He wasn't going to give anyone credit for telling him this, but he's like, yeah, you could tell when Kyle Kyle's a big, or he didn't say like when they were discussing it. It was more, Kyle really likes that he's able to extend plays and move around, and that's a big benefit to the offense. But it's kind of clear sometimes he wishes he would not rely on that as much. And I do think Purdy has gotten pretty, and it works some of the time, where he does like these Russell Wilson 2014 scramble arounds. He's doing like 360s, running back and forth. Like it's cool to watch and it's impressive. He's clearly a good athlete, but you got to be careful about overdoing that stuff. One, it's going to lead to some turnovers thrown across your body. And two, you're going to do a 180 or a pirouette and come around a corner and like Chris Jones is going to be there and he's going to slam you into the ground and like break your sternum. So I think there's got to be some balance. It feels like it's gotten a little over aggressive. And when he just plays within the construct of the offense, throws on time, gets rid of the ball, obviously his accuracy speaks for itself. And his athleticism, which has been very impressive over the course of his career, there's got to be some balance to it. I'm not against him taking off and running for first downs. Clear to tonight, he was overall. I thought he had a pretty good game, like really good game. B plus. I don't think I'd quite give it an A. A couple incompletes, a couple balls that are a little off, but overall, like that's throw 3 touchdowns. Now one of them was Debo doing most of the work, but the 2 red zone touchdowns to Kittle were really good throws. I mean, the first one was elite stuff. Outside the DB, where the DB's all over him. That's just an elite play by both guys. And, yeah, man. I also think back to the Mason thing. It is the counter to like, oh, we gotta pay our running backs. We gotta draft them high. Like this guy's an undrafted free agent. 3 years in, it's like you can just ride him like a horse. He's leading the league in rushing. So it's like Christian McCaffrey makes 19 million. I mean, who knows? All these different stories coming out about his Achilles. Who knows what to believe, when he'll be back? They clearly don't even know. And you can just find an undrafted free agent who has overcome them. Beside McCaffrey, they've drafted over the last 3 or 4 years. I feel like 5 running backs, and he's just passed them all immediately. And then obviously they hit on the guy. Hit on the guys. That's a little, I would say premature. I can't say that yet, but he had a huge run. He ran a 4.3 at the combine. The 31 from Louisville. I can't really. I want to say Guerrero, but that's not his name. Screw up his last name. I don't want to do that. But that run tonight was huge. And Kyle, I think, gets kind of the monkey off his back in the sense of like, you can't keep blowing these games. You have to win these games. And you watch them play. And in theory, if Christian's able to come back, if Dre Greenlaw is able to come back, this team can be more healthy down the stretch. Like, that's a Super Bowl contender. And I still, like, I believe watching them play this year, like, they're pretty damn good. Their defense is not as dominant as it once was. Their defensive line isn't as good. One area that they are really good at is defensive back. They have drafted and hit on a ton of DBs. I mean, they go about 4 deep at safety. Renardo Green, the dude that picked the ball off in front of DK, he's a 2nd-round pick this year. And Lenore's good. Obviously, Charvarius, who's hurt, is a really good corner. Like, they got a ton of good DBs. And while Devondre Campbell is somewhat of a liability in space, Fred's so freaking good that he can make up for it. So overall, as a team, like, got a lot going for him. And I think if you play them, and I know they already did, and it was at Minnesota, and it might be again, because in a playoff game, that's where dropping those 2 divisional games, if at the end of the year you're 12-5, well, shit, you went 12-5. 2 of your losses, you had double-digit leads in the 4th quarter, and they were divisional opponents. Like, that 12 wins could have been 14 pretty easy. And all of a sudden you look up, Minnesota. Now maybe Minnesota ends up with that 14-3-2, and it wouldn't have mattered. They beat you head up. So, and I know sometimes that's not the exact tiebreaker. I'm not dialed in on the tiebreaker rules, but overall, I think this year has been more frustrating than than fun for 49er fans because of the way that they just weird things have been happening to them. And tonight it felt like it happened again, where I can't fathom this. I'm pro replay. I really am. And I'm pro the challenges, even at certain times, if they slow down the game. I understand. I think they've been additive the way the NFL does it to the overall product. And I think as someone that gambles a lot of money, I know a lot of people gamble money whether that's $5 or $500,000. Like, you do not want to get screwed over. And tonight's a good example of, like, it's pretty clear that touched his finger and the 49ers fell on it. And at the time, it felt like, what if the Niners lose? And they should have gotten the ball. And then they get later in the game, Al's talking to whoever the hell the referee is in the booth. And he's like, they told me that they didn't have our feed. They just had the raw footage, and they couldn't tell. What are we doing? I mean, all these teams are worth $5 to $10 billion. The league is making, what's the league worth as a whole? Hundreds of billions of dollars. And we can't get the same replay that we're watching on our screen. Like, that's the type of stuff that is unacceptable. Like, that can't happen. If you are going to do replay, which I'm all for, and I think most people in big situations are for it as well, those people have to have all the access that is humanly possible. If we have more access sitting on our couch, sitting, at a bar watching the game than the referee does at the game, like, I understand people are going to blow calls, not see things live, especially something like that. It's so hard to see. I have no issue with that. That's what a challenge flag is for. That's what the replay is for. But you got to be able to give them all the access they need, and you have to get it right. Like, the only way this works is if you get it right. And for the most part, they get it right. But tonight, that was really, really bad. So Kyle Shanahan, even with that, finally gets everyone off his back a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's nice little win by the 49ers. Nice little win. They needed it. Now you get a little mini bye, play the Chiefs in 10 days. And I'm pretty sure they said tonight they're coming off a bye. So that'll be a big game, because last time I checked, the Chiefs have kind of owned the Niners. A couple Super Bowls, regular season game was pretty ugly a couple years ago. I think that might have been Christian McCaffrey's debut. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure the final score was like 50-10. That's what it feels like in my head. It was an ass kicking. The Niners might have scored a little bit in the second half, so maybe the score is a little closer, but I promise you this, the score was not close. The Chiefs embarrassed the Niners. The Niners actually have played them well. I mean, hell, they've been winning the games in the Super Bowls, but Andy Reid has some ownage over Kyle. So that would be a way you win that game. All of a sudden, people forget a little bit about the Arizona and, I almost said St. Louis, Los Angeles Rams debacles. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and, of course, touchdowns. At DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Running it from the one or an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. On Seattle, I do have a lot of respect, like I said, for them being able to pivot off Russell Wilson and Geno and getting just someone really credible and staying as a high-level operation. I love Mike Macdonald. He is everything that Robert Saleh should have been for the Jets. It's like, I hire you because of your defensive expertise. I want you to call the defense. I want it to be your baby. It's how you lock in with, the squad. Get to know I'm not looking for a CEO here. You're 38, 37, 41, like, run the deal. What does Mike Macdonald do? Runs the defense, which is going to be fine the better players they get and the guys that come back from injury. I mean, I feel like tonight they're losing a guy on every play. And to just be able to function, I think Ryan Grubb's a really, really good offensive coordinator. John Schneider is one of the better GMs in the league. Like, they got a lot going for them. But this Geno thing, he's kept your head above water. He's made you a respectable team where half the league would die for that, right? To just be like, hey, we are going to be a lock to be in the playoff mix. And if we can just be a little healthier, at minimum, we should 9-8, 10-7, be a wild card team. But if you can't beat the 49ers, and he can't, like, the evidence is in, it ain't even close. This offseason, we got to make a bold move. We got to do something to roll the dice. And I'm talking about the draft because I think Seattle, if they are drafting somewhere like 15 to the low 20s, would be a prime position team to just put all the chips in the middle of the table. I mean, he's been thinking about doing it for years, right? He wanted to do it with Josh Allen when they were going to trade Russell Wilson to the Cleveland Browns to get Josh Allen. So this is a guy who's got stones, and I think the writing's on the wall. And that doesn't mean this is not even a criticism of Geno. He kind of is what he is, which is pretty damn good. Like he's the high level bridge starter. But at the end of the day, when you're that, it does limit your ceiling. And when they played the best team in their division, the team that if they could beat, they could win the division, a team that they have to see probably in the playoffs if they're a wild card. You know, if they're the 6 or 7 seed, I mean, that's what happened a couple years ago. They played the 49ers and got beat. Like, you got to beat that team. And you're just not doing it with Geno. So, listen, I'm not acting like this is the greatest quarterback draft, but we know John Schneider likes traits. It's why he loved Russell Wilson back in the day. It's why he loved Josh Allen. Honestly, Geno has a lot of good traits. I'm talking physical traits, arm strength, mobility. It's why he liked Drew Lock, who just not that great of a player, but falls under that category. And I just, there's some guys in this draft that if John Schneider falls for, roll the dice because you got a good young coach that everyone's high on. You got an offensive coordinator that can scheme up plays. I mean, Ryan Grubb, he's been better than I thought. We knew how good he was for DeBoer at Washington with Penix and all those guys and Dunze and Polk. But to never have coached in the NFL and come up and immediately just like you just watch them play, they're really good on offense. They're creative. It's been a seamless transition. Like the guy, and honestly, you might only have him for a couple years. So roll the dice now, try to get a quarterback, and give yourself a chance because you're just not beating Purdy and Kyle Shanahan. Like you're not even getting close. And I respect that operation a lot, and I hope they do to make it a little more competitive because this Geno thing has just hit its ceiling when they play the top team. So big win for the Niners. I still think Seattle gets some guys healthy. They'll be right there in the mix for a wild card spot. And depending on how the NFC plays out, it wouldn't shock me if they won 9 games, we're like the 6th seed. So they're the second best team to me, if just remotely healthy in the NFC West, given how many injuries the Rams like are going to have for a while, right? Like those guys aren't coming back soon. They're missing, who knows, Puka and Cooper Kupp. Like this could be MIA for a while. And you're just not going to win games like that. And the other thing is you get so far deep into a hole, all of a sudden you're 2-8, even if you're in every game. But if you're losing them all, like you can't come back from that. And then it gives you allow no margin for error. That's another problem for Seattle, right? You go, well, what if the Rams do have a season from hell and they draft a quarterback? So it's like, well, Purdy ain't going anywhere. Kyler is a kind of a bizarre player, but he's clearly not going anywhere either. And he's a mother to play, right, on an individual game basis. And then what if the Rams end up with like the 6th pick, trade up to like number 2 and draft one of the top, draft like Shador Sanders? That's who Sean McVay likes. So NFC West, that's a good Thursday night game. That was a fun Thursday night game. Places were rocking, and 49ers pull it out. Obviously, Fugazi Friday. I talked a little bit about this with Stuckey, and I've been thinking a lot about this because the viral video of Rodgers on McAfee, right? We all know the timeline of. Well, let's just start with this. As a player, like part of the Fugazi of getting a coach fired, if you're a player, LeBron has been doing it for years. I don't expect you to come out, even if the guy like LeBron has gotten coaches fired that stunk. Aaron Rodgers, if he doesn't think Saleh is any good, I don't even really disagree with him. Like Robert Saleh easily could have lost his job over the offseason. So it's been happening for a long time in sports with star players getting coaches fired. And I would say we'd have to like really break it down over the last 30 or 40 years. A high percentage of them are correct. But then it's one thing to be like, listen, it's not my job. I don't want to talk about it. These guys constantly discuss, like, what are you guys talking about? Getting this guy? No, I had me getting this guy fired. It's like they go overkill. And with Rodgers, what makes it pretty bizarre, the more and more I've thought about my bald brother losing his job, is that he was like, they lose Sunday morning. So when they come back by Monday, right? I understand they're playing on Monday night. So really Tuesday's like a Monday. But usually if you were going to fire someone, you would do it Monday. And I'm pretty sure I read Woody Johnson's never even fired a guy in season. But we've all heard by now, obviously, all of his buddies over there watching embarrassing Sam Darnold beating him. A lot of variables. So you want to fire him? I have no issue with firing him. But if you were going to fire him as the owner or decide that as a front office / ownership, you would have done it on Monday morning. But then for them to have a phone call and Rodgers to say that, yeah, he was just like asking me about my foot. He was just checking in, seeing like, Aaron, what'd you do today? What do you watch on TV? It's like how you'd call your brother or dad, like, hey, what's up? You know, where you just call nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about. You usually don't do that in a professional environment, I would say. Right? If you're going to call someone you work with, whether it be a colleague, an employee, a boss, you might shoot the shit for a minute. Hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Right? You just have basic small talk. But then eventually you like, well, X, Y, and Z, whatever you're calling for. You cannot convince me. And I don't blame if Aaron's asked him saying, yeah, this guy stinks. This guy's not any good. Right? But then for you to come out and consistently push that didn't happen, like no one can believe you. It's not believable. Because eventually, like when everyone just takes a step back and listens to it, we're all human beings. It's why I think like the political stuff, like jumped the shark so long ago. Like you do realize how normal people talk and like how normal people live in this world. You know, it's like you can push one narrative, but it's like we're living, like we're alive. Every day we do things, and this is how the world goes around. So you can't tell me it's X when I live and it's Y. So it's like, Aaron, we have all been in situations where someone called us a boss, an owner. No one can believe in your situation, you're viewed as the savior, that didn't come up. And honestly, I don't expect him to say, listen, I didn't think Saleh was any good. I gave Woody, he asked me what, if he fired him, would I care? I said no. Now, I do think if he said that, I think we've never been in a world where authenticity rings truer and it resonates with more people. I actually think a lot of people would have respected it. Now, I get it, like getting a guy fired as a player would feel a little weird, but I actually think he would be shocked by the reaction of people, aka the fans. Be like, I respect it. Be like, listen, I've been around Mike McCarthy. I've been around LaFleur. I think this guy's fucking terrible. I don't think he knows what he's doing. He's not calling the offense, not calling the defense. He gets up in the press conference, makes a mockery of what we're doing because he can never get his words straight. He's always saying one thing and we're doing another. Then he has to come back. There's no accountability anywhere. So what every single player says, I just think he stinks. Like if he just honestly said that, there would be no pushback. I'd be like, God, yeah, no shit. We've all been seeing it. But I also think this, like the NFL doesn't run like the NBA. And my comp to this situation, because he's done it a million times, is LeBron. But in the NBA, and listen, LeBron at 40 years old is way better than Aaron Rodgers at 40, like dramatically better. So the guy that they are leaning on just isn't good enough. And clearly in the history of the NFL, star players have been spoken to by their owner about some ideas. So it's not abnormal. Where this thing gets a little weird is like he doesn't really have that much equity there. He's only played 5 games. He does not look that good. And all the players now know, like, God, the owner's just calling him and asking him, could he call about me? What if I'm a player not doing that well? Like, could they call about me? The Jets are a disaster. There's no way around it. Now, they're a must-watch disaster, and they're on television all the time disaster. I mean, they're playing the Bills this week, which the storylines, it's all going to draw us there. And Ulbrich, former player, feels cool. Feels a little Dan Campbell-ish back in the day at Miami. But I really think this is going to get worse. And I told Stuckey this today. if you truly doubt the Jets, which I do, and I've doubted them from the beginning. Like if you were never anyone on the fence, like thought that I never thought they were a playoff team. Now the one game against the Patriots, like damn, Rodgers looks pretty good, but then clearly he's just the majority of his games he's looked old, frail, and now he's banged up. If you're just out on them and you go, well, they're playing the Bills, who clearly have been a little up and down this season. But you go, they got Josh Allen, they got a winning culture, and they know how to win, and they know how to win this division. The Jets lose that game, and the Jets lose it by double digits. And it just gets back to the what that moment stood for. Like what happened this week, it resembles shitty ownership, shitty dysfunction, or shitty culture, dysfunction interwoven into everything these guys do. You can't shake that. Maybe you could band-aid it for a week, but Jeff Ulbrich, part of what he brought to the table was like he was a really good defensive coordinator. Like he handled that. Now he's got more responsibility. So does that diminish it all? Todd Downing, the Hackett thing, that thing could get weird. Listen, if Aaron Rodgers didn't have the juice, Hackett would have been fired. Him and Robert Saleh would have both cleared out their offices. But he gets demoted because the star ain't going to throw his buddy to the wolves. Like, what do you think these players think? Again, they live in the real world, right? They go into that building every day. Like, they see it, right? They are living it much closer than we are. So they're going, well, what? Even if they thought Saleh was average, there's no way they think like, Hackett's getting a raw deal here. Actually, better than you realize. Not saying he's Bill Walsh, but he's definitely better than the way they're talking about him. So the lies and the statement from Aaron is just, it was just an all-timer. It really was. It's just one of those that you'll never forget. It's really one of his classic moments that, yeah, shit, what are you watching? Dancing with the Stars? Monday Night Football? What's on TV, Aaron? What do you eat for dinner? Give me a break.